If you've been watching our videos about upgrading our battery and electrical system, this is part 6 in that series where we're going to give you our first update after living with them for about
3.5 months now.
I think that's about right. We've driven across the continent from British Columbia to Atlantic, Canada. We're currently in Nova Scotia, overlooking the Bay of Fundy.
And we apologize if it's a little bit windy right now while we're recording. We are literally on a bluff overlooking the bay, so the breeze is pretty stiff.
So I want to tell you about some of the obvious numbers that make the difference between this Xantrex eGen Lithium battery and the house battery bank we had before.
The obvious improvement that we've gotten from doing this upgrade is the increase in capacity. So our old battery bank was 4 standard size AGM batteries. It gave us 440 amp hours of battery capacity, but only 50% of that was usable.
Right, if you have an AGM or flooded lead acid batteries, you can only safely, properly use 50% of its capacity before you're doing harm to the battery. This battery can have 90% of its capacity used up, so that's a big difference right there.
Right, so at 600 amp hours, 90% of that means we can use 540 amp hours without doing any damage to the battery.
Where it used to be our 440 amp hour battery bank, we could use 220. So we've gone from 220 usable amp hours to 540, approximately a 2.5 times increase.
Now the amazing thing is that we've increased its size without really increasing its size. It's taking up the same space as our old 4 batteries did for all intents and purposes.
A little bit more space.
And it even weighs less.
It weighs over 100 pounds less. And we only had to widen the tray a little bit to fit it here.
Now, of course, we knew right off the bat that we were going to be getting increases in our capacity, but I think the thing that maybe caught me by surprise the most was the fact that the charging speed has become probably our single favorite feature of the new system. So with a lead acid or an AGM battery, you have to go through the typical 3-stage charge cycle, which means bulk followed by a long absorb cycle, and then it finally reaches float.
And even when it reaches float, it's not really full yet.
Right, so with the lithium battery, it literally takes full power from our charger straight through till it reaches 100% and then kicks over to float. So that means that the charging speed is dramatically increased. This one battery has the power capacity of 10 of our old AGMs, and it can fully charge from 0 to 100 in about 4 hours. We can replace literally 25% of this battery's capacity in 1 hour of charging.
Which is really handy because a lot of boondocking, when you're in the forest or if it's not sunny out, you may need to run the generator. Now, we mentioned, by the way, that we did not increase our solar. If you're wondering why we didn't do that, check the very first video in this series where we explained why we were doing this in stages. We will be updating our solar, but we haven't yet. So we have the same 3 panels that we always had so that we can see how this behaves in the exact same conditions we had before with no extra help from more solar. So when you do have to run your generator, how long are you going to run it to get your batteries to charge back up? It used to be that when we had to run the generator, we had to do it more often, and we also had to do it for longer because it was kind of like going to the high-speed pumps at a truck stop where you go to the high-speed fuel pumps and you can fill a diesel RV or a large truck very, very quickly. This takes power kind of like those high-speed pumps at the diesel island at the truck stop, very fast. That's different than AGM or flooded lead acid. They have resistance to charging, and the problem is the more they get charged, the more they resist.
Right.
So you can run your generator charging regular batteries for 2 or 3 or 4 hours and still be working to get them up to full charge. This doesn't work like that. It will take full power all the way to the end so rapidly that we can simply start the generator, run it for 1 hour, and put 25% of the capacity back in the batteries, just like that, without any resistance from it at all.
And that's really been a big boon because, camping in various campgrounds across the country, we have been in a lot of situations where we've been parked in the trees, which means we've got shade. So while we're gone for the day and our residential refrigerator is powered up, keeping everything cool, the solar panels haven't been putting very much power back into the battery at all. So if we were dry camping for a couple of days like that, we are now at a point where we need to run the generator, and we come back from being out for the day, we can literally run the generator for an hour or two and bring us back up to either 25% or 50% more power and make it through the night no problem, no worries whatsoever.
And the nice part about that is that there's another feature, another factor in lithium technology that is different than AGM or flooded lead acid. It doesn't care how much you charge it. The problem with AGMs and lead acid is that you have to charge them fully every time you charge them, or you're degrading their health. Now, you're not going to destroy or damage them immediately if you don't charge them all the way.
Right. We pretty typically would dry camp for a week, running the generator and not fully topping them off, but then would really feel like it was time to hit a full service campground and plug in to make sure they got returned to 100%.
What happens is you typically walk the batteries down over a period of days. So maybe the batteries are at 50% and you start the generator, charge them up for an hour or two, bring them up to maybe 75, 80%, and then you have a choice. You either turn the generator off and leave them not fully charged, which is bad for them over time, or you run the generator a long, long time. So what typically happens is you'll run the generator for a couple of hours, not get them fully charged. The next day it's a little lower and a little lower, a little lower. And that's what we call walking them down. And that's bad for the batteries and doesn't give you the power you want.
And quite honestly, for us at least, there was an anxiety associated with that of just worrying about your batteries. When do we need to charge them? Have we drained them too low? Did we just do damage and reduce their lifespan? All those kinds of things. The beauty with lithium is it doesn't matter whether it's at 30% or 80% or 60%. You can charge it for a while and stop. It doesn't lose capacity from not returning to 100% charge. So
doesn't care.
Yeah, exactly. The quality of life aspect of that has probably just been the nicest change. Now, another side of that not needing to bring them up to 100% charge is also the fact that their voltage curve is very flat. So another benefit that we've actually noticed is the fact that it doesn't matter where you are in the state of discharge, the voltage stays very steady. So your water pump cycles normally, and your fans run at normal speed, and your lights, if you don't have LEDs, don't dim. So the power curve is extremely steady as well.
Yeah, and there's a difference also in knowing how far the batteries are discharged, because the meter that's inside, that we installed inside, has a percentage that tells us exactly how much the battery capacity is. So when it says the battery capacity is at 10%, it's at exactly 10%. If it says it's 90%, it's at exactly 90%. Now, there are battery monitoring systems, what are typically called BMKs, battery monitoring kits, that you can install in your rig even if you don't have lithium batteries. And we actually installed one of those ourselves when we had AGMs. The problem with those isn't that they're inaccurate so much as that they have to be installed exactly right. The way they work is by measuring the amount of current that flows in and out of the batteries, not by just looking at the battery like a fuel gauge. And the problem is, if you install it incorrectly, it's possible that you could easily leave some draws off the battery not going through the BMK, and it won't read all the power that's going in and out.
Right, so while it's measuring that load, measuring the amount of power you're pulling out of the battery, it's not capturing all of it, and therefore you're misrepresenting the actual state of charge on the battery. You may think you're at 60%, but because of other draws that were not being pulled through that battery monitoring kit, you're actually at 50%, and you could then damage your battery without realizing it.
So of course the benefit from all this is that we don't have to run our generator as often. And that is the primary goal. We don't like to run our generator. We come to quiet places.
Maybe even windy places?
Maybe they're windy, but we consider that to be part of nature and quiet. And we don't like running our generator. And a lot of people ask about that. They're like, how long does it take for the expense of this kind of equipment to pay for itself? And for us, it isn't about that. It's always been about quality of life. Can we come to a remote, peaceful location and be here without running our generator and disturbing that quiet?
But still having access to use all of the equipment and services on board the RV that we normally use.
You also saw that we replaced our chassis batteries with AGMs These are full throttle batteries that we put here in place of our regular lead acid batteries. They have more cold cranking amps. Obviously, they've been working great. It's not winter. We haven't been challenging them, but a big part of the reason we did that, we don't want outgassing here near all this beautiful new equipment. We didn't want to have our Xantrex eGen battery getting
corroded by battery acid.
Right, so you'll notice we have not cleaned these batteries once other than dusting them off since we put them in. There is absolutely no sign of any corrosion whatsoever.
One of the other upgrades that we made as part of this project was to install a new Glendinning cord reel. And he's going to smile like the Cheshire Cat here, because literally every time we have hooked up, he has come back inside smiling, saying how happy he is with that new cord. Not only is the reel easier to use, but the cord itself, being much more flexible, makes it that much easier to get set up.
It's a great piece of equipment, and it's also been part of allowing us to have room for our Hughes Autoformer to be properly placed without being inside the old cord reel bin like we used to have. You may have seen where we had it down inside the bin and we couldn't use our cord reel properly. That has all gone away. It's
all
allowed
modular.
us.
Yeah, we use the Hughes internal wiring kit in order to actually install the wiring for the Hughes to sit inside our bin properly.
And now if we want to change something out, if let's say we want to put in the next generation Hughes Autoformer, we can just unplug the old one, plug the new one in. So we're loving the way all this is working so far. We will be doing solar next. Now
Without a doubt, yeah, obviously the battery itself has transformed our RVing experience in all the ways we've already outlined, with more capacity and faster recharging and less using the generator. But obviously all of that would be made even better if we could harness the power of the sun.
Now you can see we're here today on a bright, bright sunny day, and we are getting charging from our solar panels.
But not enough to keep up with demand.
Those 3 solar panels totaling about
375 watts.
375, 125 each. Those provide enough power to basically power the refrigerator. We need a lot more. If you're going to boondock with a residential fridge, you need more. So solar will be next. We may have another update prior to that. We'll see. In the meantime, we'll be heading generally down to the desert southwest for the winter, where we'll get lots more opportunity to boondock.
And more sun.
We'll have more sun.
If you have any questions about any of what we've done, please feel free to leave a comment down below.
As always, we'd like to say a special thanks to our Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see how to get your name in the credits, please visit us at patreon.com/RVgeeks to find out more. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that already. And if you enjoy our videos, please consider giving us a thumbs up. As always, safe travels, and thanks for watching.